and thank you for watching CBM Calling. Today, we're featuring part 2 of our conversation with 3 ministry leaders on racism in Canada. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to those of you who watched part 1, who shared it with your friends and people from your church, saying that this is something we all need to listen to. Thank you to all of you who are engaging in race-related issues with openness, seeking to listen and to learn. I have been personally heartened by your words of encouragement and your willingness to build a different way forward together in solidarity with people from all races. It makes me hopeful for the future that it will be very different from our current reality. When one part of the body of Christ suffers, we all suffer. And now part 2 of our conversation with Cheryl Bear, Doss Sidney, and David McCleary on racism in Canada. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you afterward.
I have to admit, I was surprised. I had no idea what it was like for people in the Black community here in Toronto, where I've spent a lot of my adult life, not all, but a lot of my adult life, until there was an article that was, I think, quite widely read, and later there was a documentary and a book that was put out as well, based on the skin we're in. It was written by a journalist here in Toronto by the name of Desmond Cole. And it was really powerful because he talked about how he would just be stopped. It was about his interactions with police here in Toronto. And he would just be stopped. And by his count, he had been stopped probably at least 50 times in his young life by police for no apparent reason. He'd often just be walking down the street or, just everyday kind of things. And because there was this kind of carding system that happened in Toronto, and it was a very controversial system. Dave, I'm wondering if you can shed some light on, I have to admit, I was very ignorant that this was happening to people in Toronto. This was an everyday reality for people in our Black community in Toronto. I had no idea that was happening. Can you shed some light about, I guess, the tense relationship, or maybe that kind of difficult relationship that the Black community has with the police here in Toronto?
Well, the whole carding thing is the idea that you stop a Black person because they're potentially a person of interest, and you ask for their identification to get their card, their information, right? And to see what it is that they're up to, and it's really a way of over policing a particular community, not for any reason. And the descriptions, it's we're looking for a Black man. Fits your description. So I was like, really? That's interesting. Any distinguishing mark? No, he's a Black man about your build. How convenient. So then you have to produce your information, tell them your name and all of answer their questions, give them your ID, and then you're off, right? But that interaction could easily go sideways, right? Because it's kind of the death of a thousand cuts, right? It's just every day another iteration, another affirmation that just in the background that you don't belong here, right? This place is not for you. You're always under suspicion. That even if you're just going about your daily business, just like everybody else, trying to, keep body and soul together, provide for your family, go about your education, whatever, you're viewed with suspicion. You are viewed as a threat, not because of anything that you've done, just simply because of the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. And it builds up, and then because it's a common every day. I got pulled over while walking in my neighborhood one time. What are you doing here? Just coming back from the movie theater. Well, this doesn't really look like your neighborhood.
Oh my gosh.
And that was not too long ago. I was walking home I was like, you don't look like you belong here, right? And so I, what was tacit, what was covert, what was kind of behind the scenes was actually being said to me in my interaction with the police.
Mhm.
Like, actually, I do. Here's my stuff. That's my address. I live over there. Have a nice day, right? But then, if anything ever happens, if I say, kind of put a foot out of line, just assert my rights or my my right to be there, my right to be, like just a human being going about his business, not causing any trouble. Um, then, because it's happened, I've been pulled over so many times for nothing other than the color of my skin, driving while black, walking while black, just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mhm.
Now I'm somebody that's known to the police, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of a shortcut, just short circuits everything. I'm known to the police. Oh, well, the assumption is there must have been something going on to justify um, this behavior, this excessive use of force, this, you know, by the police in dealing with this person.
Mhm.
Um, Nothing. I
Mhm.
just felt like going to see a stupid movie,
Mhm.
and so that's what happened. This was yeah.
Mhm.
So it's something and it was something that at one time was endorsed by the mayor as a way to keep our people safe. You
Mhm.
know, keep the city safe.
Mhm.
From what? People going to the store, people coming back from the and so it becomes, you don't see the police who are, trying to keep the peace. Um, you don't see them then as peacekeepers, as people that are there to help you. You look at people that that are there to deal with you in an unfair manner.
Mhm.
You look at them with suspicion, and you look at them as a threat to
Mhm.
your very existence, right? Because they're the pointy end of the stick. They're the first face of
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
that that speaks to the underlying brutality that that communities that are not white
Mhm.
experience in so many different ways. And
Mhm.
so, yeah,
Thank you for sharing your personal experience. I know it's difficult to recount those kinds of experiences sometimes, and um, anyone who knows you would say uh, the police don't need to keep us safe from a Baptist pastor. Uh,
or maybe they do.
you're not the
Maybe they
threat
do.
to the neighborhood. The pastor is not the threat to the neighborhood, but thank
It's
you
the
for
gospel
sharing.
that's a threat. It's the gospel
Well,
that's a
that's
threat.
right. So thank you for sharing that experience. And I think a lot of people who know you would be surprised that that happens to you on a regular basis and has happened to you recently. Because people would like to think that those kinds of things don't happen anymore, or they don't happen in our country. I have noticed recently in a lot of my social media feeds the Black Lives Matter movement has really become global. It's really gone on a global scale. And what caught my attention was a story, and I don't know why this targeted my social media feed, my Facebook feed, but it said that K-pop groups, I guess I've been listening too much K-pop. K-pop groups have been donating money and standing in solidarity with the movement, which I thought was really interesting. I thought, well, what's the connection there? But you realize how broadly this has gone, and maybe, as Cheryl says, this is maybe a moment of change um, that is before us, and this is a really pivotal time in history, I think, is our hope. I'm wondering what it means to be an ally to a group of people who are not, of the same ethnic group as you, but who you would also say, are other people of color. So you feel a solidarity there. But what does it mean to be an ally? Like, I certainly hope that I want to strive to be an ally to other ethnic groups, frankly, to humanity. I want to be an ally. I want to be standing in solidarity. What does that mean? And I want to ask you, Doss, because I feel you in particular have really sought to be an ally, particularly to the Indigenous community. And you have educated yourself. Like, I'm amazed when you speak on Indigenous issues because you have clearly spent a long time studying, educating yourself, learning. talking to people, so I'm just wondering, what does it mean to be an ally to you?
Talking about being an ally, I guess at first glance, being an ally suggests you're going to be a friend. But of course, it's deeper than that. I think if you're going to be an ally, then you're going to truly listen deeply and understand, do some research, allow people to be leaders, to lead you, not feel that you have to be the leader at all times, but allow others to be the leaders in the group that you're seeking to be an ally with and for. And where possible, try and magnify that message in your spheres of influence, and tell others about this message and the truth that you have discovered. I think those are ways in which you can be an ally. Certainly, of course, one can also support their work monetarily as well. Those are all good ways to be an ally, I
Yes,
think.
those are good suggestions. I'm going to just throw an open question out, and I think it's probably a question we should have started with, but it's one I've been grappling with over these past few months, which is, where is the church in these conversations? And this is hard. We all work in church ministry in one form or another, and we love the church, and we love God's church, and we love people who go to church, and people who are part of our denomination, and outside of that, the broader evangelical circle. But where's the church in these conversations? What place does the church have in helping to dismantle the systems of injustice that we have been talking about today?
Boy, that's a tough one, isn't it?
That's why I just ask the questions. I let you guys answer the questions.
We'll grapple with them.
Well, speaking of allyship, we talked, I appreciated your conversation with Tanika Shepherd and
Mitch.
And I think that CBM is doing some pretty good work in walking alongside, and that's my term for racial reconciliation. I don't know if it's reconciliation or conciliation, but walking alongside of other nations. And I think that because of the coronavirus, we have in Vancouver, we have a lot of experiences of Asian folks who are experiencing. There's an uptick in racism towards them because of the coronavirus, right? And I just feel like, oh, it's so ugly and it's so evil. So how do we even walk alongside our Asian brothers and sisters in our communities better, right? But the church, I have felt like over the last 20, 30, whatever years it's been, of being in churches, that there's a lot of folks who don't really know a lot about the issues, and a lot of pastors and leaders also who don't really know. And Das is exactly right. Read, educate. For when it comes to Indigenous issues, you got to read Indigenous authors. You've got to listen to, you've got to, rather than bring along an Indigenous person to make you look good, you give that Indigenous person your opening thing and your honoraria. Just flip this completely over, and make room for Indigenous voices in your church. And of course, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, read, educate. I am like learning so much from just reading everything that I can online about Black Lives Matter, and of course I know a handful of Martin Luther King quotes, but that's not enough. And so but I feel like churches, honestly, I don't see a lot of response from pastors and leaders, or maybe enough. I feel like there's about like a small percentage of pastors and leaders who are sharing, who are hashtagging Black Lives Matter, and who are resharing these things and speaking out against these things. But there's still a majority who probably don't know. They just don't know what to do, or they're unsure. And this And all of these, this, people are calling it riots and whatever. I'd say rebellion. I'd say uprising. I would say
Mhm.
apocalypse. The truth is being revealed. It's almost like a reckoning,
Mm.
and it's troubling to have to sort of reckon with your own view of history, your own view of your own history, and the reality of an Indigenous or Black perspective of history of Canada and the United States. And so I think do some tough work, do some tough inner work for sure. And there's also a lot of pastors who are just tied. They're just their hands are tied when it comes to speaking out on these things, because the majority of the church doesn't always want to hear it, doesn't always want to believe it, and that's really tough.
Mhm.
So these days, it is a reckoning, and I believe that we're lining up on the side of against a God who lines up with the marginalized, with the poor. We
Mm.
see throughout the Bible, Jesus is breaking down racial barriers when he talks to the Samaritan woman. And God in the Old Testament, some of the harshest words the prophets gave were when people weren't thinking about the poor. So um, yeah, I just kind of feel like it's a reckoning. Line up with the God of justice, and then we'll be on the right side.
Mhm. Yeah, to add to that, I think churches really have a bad track record in terms of how they have dealt with racialized people. Um, I think it was just 4 years ago, the Barna Group came up with the results of a survey about attitudes in evangelical churches about racialized people, and the majority of them felt that they were not disadvantaged in any way. And in fact, if they were white, they felt that they were victims of reverse discrimination.
Mm.
And too often, the church has been a weight rather than an impetus for change in a good direction. And that is so very sad, uh, especially when you, as Cheryl was saying, when you think of the message and actions of Christ. It is tragic that that has been happening too often.
Yeah, I think I love the church, Big C Church, Little C Church, the Church Universal. This is something that's all over the world, and that it's been brought there certainly by European missionaries and you know people that were from there that have brought the message with them. Um, but I think we have to properly place Christ at the core of our identities as church. Um, if we're not about Jesus in church, we're not about anything. That's you know we get our name from him. We follow after him. We do what he does. We approach life in the way that he approaches life, and more importantly, we approach God in the way that he approaches God. And if we're not doing that as church, we have lost our way. You know, as Baptist people, uh, we're all about um, the Sermon on the Mount. We're just like, blessed are these people, all the people that are on the edges that need to be brought into God's blessing, help to be, to live into that blessing. Um, these are the people that we should have an eye out for, because, you know, God has an eye out for those people. You know, all those people that are lost, that are hurting, that are, um, you know, that are on the edges. Those are the people that we need to care for, and we don't need to do it as a social justice thing. And I think if we're doing it from a social justice kind of thing, we've also lost our way. We are in service of a social gospel that wants to redeem and reconcile everybody and everything, right? You know, wants to make God's creation fully good again. That's what we're about as church. And so, you know, that only comes from telling us the truth about who we are. We're sinners saved by grace, by God's grace, not because we've earned it or that we deserve it, but because God chose to give that to us. This is your place now because I love you. And I think we have to start from that place of loving God well so that we can love our neighbors well as we learn to love ourselves well. And I think we do ourselves a disservice in not speaking to the truth of our experiences, people that, enjoy a certain amount of privilege or get to occupy a little bit more space than other people that don't have the same things. Yes, I'm a man. I occupy this space and it's unquestioned. I have a certain education, I have these abilities, blah, blah, blah. There's a list that I can rely on, and I occupy a space that most of the time I feel pretty safe in occupying. As a church, as people in church, we also occupy a space, a place of blessing that that God has given us to be in. Our job then as church is to, through our caring, through our loving of these people, because God loves us, inviting people into that space. And if we want to keep that space just for ourselves, we are failing as the church. And too many churches, we don't get involved because we don't want to jeopardize the space that we're in. We don't want to, we don't want to make any waves. That's not our calling. That's not our place. If you're serving the kingdoms of this world, you are on the wrong side. God's kingdom comes when we do his will. So if we are not occupying that space as church, we need to ask ourselves why. And he says time and time again, the truth will set you free. So we are in a moment in history, and if we as church are willing to step into that moment, then we will be part of the movement that changes the history going forward.
As co-workers
Dave.
in God's kingdom, sorry, Dus, as co-workers in God's kingdom, how do we do that together? How do we, instead of creating more division, as a lot of people think racial conversation, any conversation about race, people think it brings division, but I don't think that's not the case. If the goal of the conversation is to bring more unity, to bring more understanding, to bring openness, to hearing about suffering and working out together how we change that. How do you think it's possible for us to, where do we begin? How do we move forward to seek reconciliation?
I've
Dos,
heard
I don't know.
that a lot. I've heard those words a lot. Stop causing division. Stop, bringing up these things because it's, and even don't say those things because it's going to threaten the amount of money that we raise. Not from this group, not from CBM, from my old life.
Wow.
But you can't go there. You can't talk too harshly about race issues because you're going to lose a support base. You can't talk too much about this thing because you're going to be perceived as causing division. Whereas dominant culture, and it just sounds like we're like, boo, coming down on white people so bad. And that's not what this is about. It's not what this is about. This is, as I said, a reckoning. Things have been going down this road for so long and it's been so normal for Euro background Canadian Americans to sort of have, and people even who are, there was a study done in Canada about white privilege. Again, I'll bring that up, but where a Canadian man and an Indigenous person walked into the same, Daz, you talked about this in this other thing earlier, but they walked into a car dealership, they walked into a bank or something. And afterward, this Canadian guy said, I don't think that there's anything wrong. I don't think that there's racism. I don't think that I'll be treated better or worse than this guy. I think that everything's the same. So this Canadian had this view that, and then watch the footage later of how differently they treated the Indigenous person and a black man. Remembered that, and I can maybe share or give you guys the link. I was trying to find it when earlier when Daz was talking. But that's then later on they interviewed the white guy, and they said, what are your thoughts after he saw the footage and he saw how they were treated differently, and he was a bit stunned. He was like, I didn't believe it, but here I see evidence of it. So when a dominant culture has control and power for so long, that is the normal. That is the normal everyday kind of a thing. And when something starts to disrupt that, of course it's going to be uncomfortable. Of course it's going to be challenging and tough, and you feel guilty. You feel maybe guilty about the past or whatever. That's not for us. That's not for people of color to, to kind of like, make you feel better about that. That's up to you. You have to take that and deal with that personally with yourself and do some of this tough work. I so appreciate Dave's what you were just sharing, and just showing your heart in all of this, because and there's been many times where I have just cried because of so much injustice and so much or not seeing it equal out. Like we have the scales of justice, with that idea, but it's been so uneven for so long against Indigenous people. And so when we try to right things, it just feels uncomfortable for everybody else, and it feels like and I use sometimes the pendulum swing. People say, oh, yeah, Native people are, I don't know. There's so many misconceptions about Indigenous folks. Indians get everything for free and stuff like that. And it's like, oh my goodness. So I try to tell people the truth, and I try to and in telling people the truth, they feel like I'm taking the pendulum and I'm like ripping it over here, and they're like, no, let's bring it back to even. And I'm like, wait, you guys have had the pendulum way over here for like 500 years. Can we just let it sit over here for a while? And then maybe we can slowly move back to center, maybe in another, I don't know how long it'll take, but things, yeah, I have this hope. I just keep holding on to hope that things could change, that things with education and young people today, I'm going on too long, but a young person who is becoming a teacher came and talked to me and actually inspired me, because this person said, well, what happened in the past was wrong, and we need to never let that happen again. And so there is a new curriculum coming out, and I think with Black Lives Matter, it's going to even make that explode in our schools, just with knowledge of a proper maybe a reckoning with history.
Tanika Shepherd called them the young prophets on the street, and I see hope in those people. So thank you to those courageous young voices that are out there of all colors that are speaking out. I think they're leading the way. Das, I want to give you the last word, because I think I cut you off there. So we're going to let you share the final thoughts.
Well, sure. No, like Dave, I believe very much in the church, and I've been working in the church all my life because of Jesus. Jesus and his message and his life, and in the present context of discussions about race and all the issues that are associated with racialization and so on. I think Jesus' message is uniquely so strong and powerful. And if only we took it to heart and embraced it, it could make a huge difference in our world. I mean, think of Jesus' messages, his first message and his last word. His first message in Nazareth, he goes into the synagogue and he talks about God's grace given to this foreign widow in Zarephath, and Naaman, the Syrian general, and the Jewish congregation at that time was so sectarian in their view, so limited in their view. They were enraged to think that Jesus would say these people are also part of God's world and God's family, and they were ready to throw him off a cliff. And his last message, we call it the Great Commission, go into all the world. It's not as if Jesus was a kingdom builder. He was saying, all people, they're part of my family. Tell them about this. And you think about so many scriptures that relate to that. and the adventures in the Acts of the Apostles, or Peter at Joppa, and the vision of all kinds of people being acceptable and having a rightful place in God's family. I think that is a significant message that too often we forget to declare and forget to live out. And that is what gives me some hope. Because we've been through this merry-go-round so often, haven't we? And you say, well, here we go again. But I hope that that as people of faith who are committed to Jesus Christ, we will take that message seriously and live it out in our own context, and so make real God's kind of world in our particular environment.
Thank you for that. That's a wonderful image and vision for us to cling on to. And indeed, that's where our hope is found. So thank you all so much, Cheryl and Dave and Doss. Thank you so much for your sharing your hearts today. And I know not easy things to talk about, but I'm so grateful that you've been willing to spend the time to do this, and hopefully to help educate some people that are watching today who want to engage more in the conversation, but probably don't know how. And so I do hope that this conversation has been helpful to some people who are watching today. So thank you so much.
Hello, thank you all so much for watching that conversation. And I hope that for all of us, that is not the end, but just the beginning of more dialogue that is needed, and more listening, active listening to one another. I do encourage you to share this video with friends, from people or people from your church. It is available on our YouTube page. It's also available on our website. So please do encourage more conversation and racial understanding. So I want to just say hello to some people that are watching today who are joining us, and just for their encouraging comments. It's always so wonderful for us as CBM staff to be able to hear the words of people within our churches and people who support CBM, just to hear your words of encouragement. It means a great deal to us. So I want to say hello to Andrea Tischer, who is joining us from Kamloops, and she's watching today. Hi, Andrea. And two friends from Regina, one of my favorite cities. I won't tell you why, but some of you know why. Marilyn Phillips and Clifford Carbino from Regina. Thank you for watching today. We also have some wise words that people have shared. Estella Ing. And Estella has, I don't think I've actually ever met Estella in person, but I really want to. And she says one of the first hymns that she learned from church was, "Jesus loves the little children, and that we are all precious in his sight." And yes, those words, I think we all know the words to that song, and we all need to be reminded of that. And Kathleen Susi, our team leader in Latin America, she says, "Thanks to each of you for this discussion. We all have blind spots and are better as people in loving others as we are loved when we are willing to step into the mess of life where we are today." Thank you, Kathleen. And Gordon Brew, my dear colleague Gordon, says, hashtag Cheryl Bear for Prime Minister should be trending after this. So Gordon, I don't know, are you Cheryl's campaign manager? I'm not sure, but we'll see if that hashtag starts to trend after this. Cheryl Bear for Prime Minister. I would vote for Cheryl, but we'll see how that campaign goes. And Heather Peterson, who is our board president, she's watching. She says, "I'm profoundly grateful for the insight, honesty, challenge, and hope found in these conversations." So thank you so much for all those words of wisdom and encouraging thoughts, and grateful to all of you who are watching today. On Friday, I should tell you what is going to be on CBM Calling. Adrian will be talking to Hope and Phoebe Santiago, who are from our partner in the Philippines, from KPM, the Kabuganaan Philippines Ministry. I hope I said that correctly. To our Filipino friends who are watching, I hope I didn't butcher your beautiful language. So watch on Friday, and you'll get to hear from the Santiagos to tell you what ministry is happening in the Philippines during this time of COVID-19. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you on Friday. Have a good afternoon, and bye.